And welcome back to Game Escape. Here today with a top 10 video looking at the top 10 environments in video gaming. Now, what do I mean by that? I thought about getting into the hobby, and of course I'm old enough to remember a time before I started playing video games, and one of the things that really drew me in to gaming and to the hobby was this idea that games could create other worlds, digital worlds into which you could kind of escape and lose yourself. And I began thinking a couple weeks ago, what are some of the greatest worlds in gaming, or some of the greatest environments in video gaming? And I try to come up with, a definition of a gaming environment and some of the attributes it needs to have to truly be great. And so for the purposes of this video, I'm going to consider an environment to be a backdrop or setting in which game actions take place. So it could be a level, it could be a stage, an area, a location, or a game world, depending on what sort of a genre we're talking about. Beyond that, it needs to have visual or narrative consistency. So it can't be a multitude of settings or a number of levels or dungeons or worlds in a game. It needs to be a place in which part of the narrative takes place, and it needs to be visually consistent. Now, beyond that, I think a great game world needs to possess one or more of the following attributes. It has to be visually beautiful and impressive. It must have functional or narrative importance in the game, and it must be historically significant in the evolution of gaming as a medium. So I've selected 10 environments that I think represent all of these attributes. And, it's a subjective discussion, of course. I have not played every video game ever made, and I think 10 people coming up with 10 lists might have a number of different games on those lists. But anyway, this is my attempt to really define 10 of the greatest places you can go in gaming. Number 10 is Super Mario Bros. World 1. Super Mario Bros. Served as a point of entry for many people into the hobby of gaming, and as such, it is the first world to have been, I think, really ingrained in the minds of a generation of gamers, to the point where many can close their eyes and remember every facet of that first stage in World 1 in Super Mario Bros. And if you started gaming in the 80s, I think if you do that exercise, you close your eyes and you think back to Super Mario Bros., you will really remember that first level. But nostalgic value aside, Super Mario Bros. Represented a defining moment in the medium. As Howard Phillips, he was the editor of Nintendo Power, as he discussed on a recent episode of the All Gen Gamers podcast, the game was the first to span multiple screens. Whereas many arcade games before it would display the entirety of the action, the story, and the mechanics on one static screen, Super Mario Bros. Allowed the player to move left to right, which also facilitated the use of a basic narrative, namely, rescue the princess. It also featured foreground and background, and really defined the visual aesthetic dominant in the series to this day. Although most of these features seem almost generic to every platform game by today's standards, they were introduced in Super Mario Bros. And are therefore central to the history of gaming. World 1 of Super Mario Bros. Was effectively an introduction into the world of gaming itself. And venturing into this world was, for me personally, the beginning of a lifelong passion. Number 9 on the list is the Green Hill Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog. The first Sonic game was released during a strange pause in the North American gaming scene. It came almost 6 years after the release of the NES and 2 months before the release of the SNES. The Nintendo Entertainment System had established the visual and mechanical idiom of gaming. It was gaming to an entire generation. The Genesis had been on the market since 1989, but it was Sonic that really seemed different and innovative. Its bold sprites, bright colors, and sense of speed totally shattered the preconceived notions of what a platformer could do, and the Green Hill Zone was the perfect embodiment of this new era. It was lush, large, and offered players a number of different paths and ways to play through it. You could do the speed run, or the obsessive quest to get every ring within the time limit, or some happy medium in between. The iconic Sonic loops, seen for the first time here, were stunning back in the day, and they seemed to say, look, Mario could never do this. When the SNES was released in August of 1991, it became clear that the Genesis was outclassed technologically. But for those 2 months in the summer of '91, Sonic and the Genesis represented the pinnacle of visual fidelity and console gaming, and the series, even when challenged by the great SNES platformers like Super Mario World, Mega Man X, Super Metroid, and Donkey Kong Country, never lost its ability to seem bold and different from anything on a Nintendo platform, a feat that it owed to the innovation scene in the first Sonic game. Number 8 on the list is the Game Center stage from Capcom vs. SNK Millennium Fight 2000 on the arcade and the Dreamcast. Throughout the 1990s, fighting games ignited the arcades, and while the Street Fighter series brought the genre to global prominence, SNK series were consistently pushing Capcom on character and stage design. Capcom vs. SNK Millennium Fight 2000 combined the visual legacy of both companies, using Sega's Naomi hardware architecture, and the result was what is arguably the most beautiful 2D fighter ever created. While one can select almost any stage of the game as being the greatest 2D fighting stage of all time, the Game Center is a notch above all others. Now, if we think back to the attributes, yes, there is no narrative value here, but there is an immense visual beauty and historical value. When playing one of Capcom's frenetic 2D fighters, you often ignore the background. But if you're playing this game, pause it at this stage. You'll notice all of the details, the gently falling raindrops, the bike racks, the transition from the dreary street to the bright game center, the sense of depth you have as you look into the arcade, the accurate game center layout with the UFO catcher machines on the ground floor, and an escalator to the top floor with Capcom and SNK fighting games. It really is incredible if you just almost view it as a painting. And you are, and this is the cool thing, you are, moreover, playing a fighting game in the environment in which the genre was born, and which, upon reflection, is just such a unique idea for a level design. Now, Capcom has produced many excellent fighting game backgrounds over the years, but I think none were as gorgeous as this one. Coming in at number 7, we have Ding Dong Dell from Ni no Kuni. Released in 2013, Ni no Kuni seemed almost too good to be true. It was a game that promised to combine the visual prowess of both Level 5 Studios and Studio Ghibli. And in an era in which games often fall short of their pre-release hype, this one delivered on every promise and may be the most beautiful RPG of all time. Ding Dong Dell, the first town to which Oliver ventures in the other world, is bursting with color and charm, and manages to be even more impressive than Motorville, which is itself a gorgeous anime representation of industrial-era America and kind of where the game starts. In 2013, I think, gamers, particularly those who grew up in the 80s and 90s, can be a bit jaded, but Ni no Kuni managed to be a link back to the great RPGs of the SNES and the 16-bit era in general. Back when the genre continually provided grand, gorgeous worlds for gamers to explore. Ni no Kuni managed to do just that, and while the anime art style might not be to everyone's taste, it certainly is in the running for being the best-looking PlayStation 3 game of all time. At number 6, we have the town of Onit from Earthbound. When I think of Earthbound, I think of Onit, the little town in Middle America in which Ness starts his quest. It possesses an undeniable quirkiness and charm that was unmatched on the Super Nintendo and still feels like a singular experience today. Earthbound was a game that did not push the technological limits of its platform, but instead embraced a very deliberate artistic minimalism that made it stand out against other tour de force games of its time like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI. The pastel colors and comparatively simplistic graphics make the game feel almost like a child's drawing, one depicting a highly satirized American town, and this is an effect that perfectly fits the narrative. Even if you were not among the throngs of Earthbound devotees, any time you do spend on it will be memorable. And with the game now having been released for the Wii U Virtual Console, now is the perfect time to visit or revisit this unforgettable locale. At number 5, we have Dragon Quest VIII, in particular the green fields of Dragon Quest VIII. And much like Capcom vs. SNK, this is a purely aesthetic choice. If you've spent any time at all with the Dragon Quest series, you'll know that grinding to level up is incredibly important, and it usually occurs in the green fields outside the towns early in these games. The green fields of Dragon Quest VIII are as lush and verdant as ever, and combined with the beautiful musical score are the perfect backdrop for leveling up early in the game. The third-person perspective offers just enough exploration to make each trip into the field seem new and exciting, and the variety of monsters and roaming bosses that can be encountered offer just the right amount of tension and discovery to these early journeys. The result is that level grinding seems like far less of a chore here than in other Dragon Quest games. And these fields are one of the many visual touches that create the feeling of being pulled deeper into what was always just a flat, two-dimensional world in the other Dragon Quest games. And this is an experience that I hope Square Enix builds on with another fully 3D console Dragon Quest game. And incidentally, if you like that idea of a 3D Dragon Quest world, you can also try Dragon Quest Swords on the Nintendo Wii, which also captures something of that exploratory charm that we have here in Dragon Quest VIII. At number 4, we have Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, particularly the light world, or the overworld of the game. Longtime fans of the Legend of Zelda series have likely read about Shigeru Miyamoto's inspiration for these games, his boyhood explorations of the hills and forests near the rural town of Sonobe, part of Kyoto, Japan. The first game realized this inspiration, in spite of the Nintendo Entertainment System's graphical limitations, but the SNES iteration of the series truly brought this vision to life. The fields and forests of the light world are incredibly detailed and seem to offer almost limitless exploration, or at least it felt that way when the game was first released. This vision of Link wandering through the bright green meadows, clearing brush, stumbling upon little villages, talking to hermit sorcerers, and even lumberjacks dwelling deep within the landscape, is truly iconic and has not been matched by subsequent games in the series, though Link's Awakening on the Game Boy was close. Though the game takes Link through castles, dungeons, and even a parallel universe, I found myself always wanting to come back to the light world and venture out into its fields in search of hidden treasure or side quests. I can only hope that the upcoming sequel on the 3DS deepens this experience. Number 3 on our list is Midgar from Final Fantasy VII. Now, Final Fantasy VII was a revelation to longtime RPG fans and gamers in general when it was released in 1997. Though a Final Fantasy game through and through when it came to gameplay mechanics and combat, the narrative of Final Fantasy VII took all of the series' standard elements and transposed them onto a more adult and nuanced storyline dealing with environmentalism, terrorism, and personal discovery. The backdrop for all of this was Midgar, one of gaming's most iconic dystopian settings, and also one of the earliest console dystopian settings. Midgar is presented as a 2D pre-rendered background across which the 3D polygonal characters roam, and it is absolutely stunning. Each pre-rendered scene displays tremendous artistry in depicting a variety of vistas in this hulking, dirty, and corrupt metropolis, which nonetheless contains small areas of natural beauty peeking through the detritus. Accompanying this is an unforgettable musical score that makes the world seem almost soulful, a stark contrast to the gray and oppressive dystopias of modern gaming. The city, moreover, felt huge for its era, and the time spent there seemed like a game unto itself. It was therefore shocking when Cloud and company finally broke through the walls of Midgar to discover an entire world in which to continue their story. It was this realization that made Final Fantasy VII revolutionary. Midgar alone seemed so much larger, so much more realistic, and so much more interesting than all of the RPGs that came before it. And yet it was only the first part in a truly immense adventure. Number 2 is the Bob-omb Battlefield from Super Mario 64. Much like Super Mario Bros., Super Mario 64 introduced gamers to a new kind of world. This time, one in which characters could freely roam in a three-dimensional space. I've previously commented on how revolutionary and different this game was from all that had come before it, and how at the time, it shattered gamers' understanding of what a platformer was. Although it is decidedly primitive by today's standards, it provided hours upon hours of fun and exploration in 1996, and still holds up today with its clean visuals and healthy dose of challenge. The introduction to this new era in console gaming was the iconic Bob-omb Battlefield, Mario's first stage in this new 3D challenge. It was the first setting in which Mario could stomp Koopas, find mushrooms, collect coins, and even fly in 3D. And as such, it set the tone and gameplay style for all subsequent 3D Mario games. If you grew up with the NES and SNES Mario games and were still a gamer at the launch of the N64, I think it's fair to say that you will never forget your first foray into the Bob-omb Battlefield. And the number 1 game on my list, in my opinion, the greatest environment in the history of gaming, is Cyrodiil from the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. Now, this game was released in 2006 by Bethesda Software and is one of the most iconic role-playing games, and I think iconic video games of all time, thanks in large part to its massive and unbelievably immersive setting, Cyrodiil. This game, more than any other on this list, fulfills the criteria that I set out at the beginning almost perfectly. It is a place of incredible visual beauty, far surpassing anything seen on PCs and consoles before its release. It functions in the narrative in an incredibly innovative way. You are presented with the story exposition in the Imperial City prisons at the beginning of the game, but you discover the rest of it as you traverse this game world. You can move at your own pace, in any direction you want, tackling whatever series of quests you want in whatever order, and the story will be slowly revealed to you in different ways. Every area you explore, every monastery you find, every wanderer you encounter, and even every book you read reveals more and more details about the game world and its history. For the first time in gaming, you were discovering a narrative as you were discovering a world, and this is a truly historic innovation. Cyrodiil functions almost like a vast network, linking all of these narrative moments in the game together. And it was, and still is, a great pleasure to traverse its hills, groves, mountains, and forests. Skyrim may be larger, it may tell a more intricate story, and it may have better graphics, but Oblivion was the first game to offer all of this innovation in one package. And it is, in my opinion, a more visually engrossing locale than Skyrim, especially if you play it with some of the aftermarket graphical mods. The experience to be had in Cyrodiil represents, in my opinion, the future of video game narratives. And it is a future I hope Bethesda and other companies will fully realize on the 8th generation of home consoles. So that's my list, my opinion on the top 10 environments in the history of video gaming. Again, this is a very, very subjective kind of exercise, and I think it would be great if you guys out there would leave a comment talking about your top 10 environments in gaming, or leave me a video response. Like I said, I think if a lot of people sort of go through this exercise and try to think of their favorite worlds in games, I think we'll have some, certainly differences of opinion, but there may be 1 or 2 or 3 games that are common to all gamers, and maybe we can then start thinking, well, maybe objectively, these places are some of the coolest and best and most memorable environments in gaming. So I thank you for watching the video. Like I said, looking forward to the discussion. And thank you for watching Game Escape. We will be back shortly with some new videos.